Hey guys, and welcome. So what's been happening in the hobby this week? Well, I thought we'd talk about Death Guard HQs, but in particular Typhus and his value and all of that kind of stuff, because I think there's definitely some winners and losers in the HQs slots for Death Guard. And since last week we talked about Hellbrutes, I thought this week we'd have a little bit of a chat on HQs and sort of how they, I guess, the Virons or whatever, the elite choices, and how that all kind of works, and some of my thoughts as I've been playing a couple of games and seeing them in action with the new book, and what sort of effect these kinds of HQs have compared to your Blightspawn and all those kind of your Surgeon and all those kind of like elite choices, and where you're getting your value. So yeah, without further ado, let's get into it. So we've got, I don't have the Lord of Virulence or whatever it's called. Virulence, that's the one. But we do have a lot of Contagion here. Typhus, the Demon Prince, and then an assortment of Playcasters and some Chaos Lords with some Lightning Claws. So yeah, what's the go with all this stuff? Well, as I talked about in the previous one with Hellbrutes, between 8th edition and 9th edition, there is a real big difference to what you would take, and that has to do with things like core rules for Lords giving out reroll ones and stuff like that. So you're going to be using different HQs for different roles now. They're not going to... So before, as you can see, I've got these two here. I was using either one or two of these for a lot of that reroll ones, babysitting vehicles and all that kind of stuff, and giving out the rerolls and all those kind of things. And they're great, like Chaos Lords. I'm a big fan of cheap HQs and not having like super uber massive HQs, which is a good segue into Typhus here, which he is a great choice because he combines basically two HQs in one for cheaper than buying them individually. So if you think about it, Typhus basically has Lord of Contagion, stat line with a mastercrafted weapon, which is almost like having a relic weapon. He's very, very close to being exactly like a Lord of Contagion, and he also combines, but he can cast spells, and that's the real thing that makes this guy super amazing. So he's casting spells too, which is a big deal, more than the Demon Prince, and you're getting him for 165 odd, I think he is. Yeah, and the Malignant Playcaster over here, he's doing the same job. He's 95. So a lot of Contagion here is 120. He's 95. That's what's that, 215 points or whatever. So you're looking at and he's 165. So you're getting what's that 50 points difference. And he even does mortal wound output, just like the Playcaster does. Arguably better almost in some instances. So he's doing mortal wound output. He, just like the Playcaster does when he's casting spells and all that kind of stuff. A different type of mortal wound output, but still he's able to do it. And you're getting all of these other special rules with him. If you do take Poxwalkers, you get additional benefits and so on. If you're putting him in Harbinger's, detachment, then you're going to get benefits there too. But you don't have to put him in, as far as I know, from the rules, it looks like you don't have to put him in that one. It's only if you do, then you've got to give him that warlord trait and stuff. If you want to give him warlord traits, he doesn't get a choice of what. So he's a bit limited in terms of both being given relics and warlord traits, because you can't really take them, and he has a specific one that he has to have if you're going to give him something for those Contagion abilities. But you don't really need him to be doing all that. Just as a basic Lord of Contagion, essentially, with a Playcaster built in, 165 points is such a good deal. It really is. And that's really the value there. So you're getting two in one, and certainly for smaller games, I feel Typhus is hands down like the best choice, because you're getting everything you need in one model, more than you would the Demon Prince. You're getting that extra spell, and because regardless of 8th to 9th edition, you still need those buffing spells, they're important for Death Guard, no matter which edition you're playing. And yes, some of these other abilities are now defunct. So things like Chaos Lords now are pretty much, put them in the back here because they're not really as important anymore. You can still definitely use them, and I still would in certain instances, but generally speaking, I don't think they come into play as much anymore because they're not really useful enough, because you really want them a cheap Chaos Lord to be in the back somewhere, just giving you those buffs. And you could still do that if you were doing, like, I could see it running like in a heavy Death Guard, Plague Marine, the troops, like a large troop type detachment where you've got, maybe 30 or 40 Plague Marines on the table, and you're wanting to buff get some rerolls there and stuff like that, and you put a Surgeon in there to give them all the 6+ Feel No Pain, all those kind of things. If you were doing some sort of, castle type tactic, then that could work. But that brings me into the next part of it, which is, castling up and doing this type of bubble aura kind of movement of your army across the table doesn't really work as well anymore, because the game is so spread out, so objective focused, more so than 8th edition, and you really do have to be spreading out, and that means that you're not really getting the value for a lot of those auras, which is why I've gone for the 3 HQ choice now that they've fixed the Demon Prince description so that he can be taken with a Lord in the one detachment. You can go the 2 detachments, have 2 in one and 1 in the other, like 2 patrols. Yeah, you're paying 2 CP, but now you've got 3 really deadly characters on the table with lots of psychic there. That's enough. You only really need 3 spells. With Death Guard, that's more than enough to get you through those first few turns before you engage in combat. And it's 3 major threats. And if you're going to couple them with, which I was talking about in the previous one of my hobby vlogs, the Death Shroud Terminators are key, right? So for this type of composition, you would 100% be putting some Death Shroud Terminators in there, because they're going to be absorbing the hits coming in as you walk across the table, because you're more than likely to come across, snipers on the other side, and they're going to be trying to target those characters because they need to get rid of them, because they're very, very hard to get rid of once they get into combat. And you've got some great choice there. And I think they're giving you more value than, let's say, the Viron kind of guys are, the Blight Spawns and all that. They're great. Like, obviously the killer combo is to have the Blight Spawn in there fully upgraded, to negate charges and stuff like that. That's great. But even you don't want all your eggs in one basket. And so what I've been finding is a lot of those Virons aren't really paying for themselves, and that's where I found the points to put the extra HQ in, because having this one in here for 120 points is going to do you way more work than any of those elite choices are. It's just going to do much more work. He's got an aura too. Their vector, this one's got the vector of disease. I'm pretty sure the Lord of Changes does as well. So it's extra mileage on your -1 toughness, as you're moving up. And if you're combining this sort of thing with Blight Haulers aggressively moving up in front, you've got these coming up. You've got that leaves your Plague Marines and your Pox Walkers and your other units to go and spread out and take those objectives, because you're presenting like a lot of different threats coming across. And if you can fit one of those drones in with the flesh mower, gunning up along the side, or whatever you want to do, or maybe babysitting a Demon Prince with wings and have him fly up there, now you're presenting like a lot of big targets. So what are they going to shoot at? What are they going to do? It's going to be tricky, and with the Death Shroud moving up, protecting a lot of this stuff, it's going to be almost impossible to get rid of them. So these are definitely some ideas that I think will definitely work going forward in 9th edition for sure. And I'm certainly going to be playtesting some of these ideas and seeing how well it works. And once I've honed it down, I'll definitely be discussing my final conclusion on that and how well it's worked. And thankfully, I've got a good opponent to verse against, who takes guard and quite a shooty, like a heavy shooty army composition wise, and so that's good, because it means I've got to go up against some pretty heavy firepower and see if I can withstand it. And in the last game that I played, he stitched me up, he got me, and that's where I started to look at, like, hey, why is this happening? Because previously, my units just weren't dying, and that was because of, you know, a very different rule for them. You know, the resilience rule was very different in 8th edition, and the way you played it was a little different. You could have your sort of more castle-y kind of thing and move slower up the board, but now you need to kind of be a bit more, you know, offensive with your movement. You can't just be very slowly moving, and you can see that in the fact that they've changed, you know, the movement rates of the Terminators and stuff in Death Guard and all that, so that they move a bit quicker, and their rules for you know, ignoring certain debuffs to moving through movement debuffs and stuff like that. I'm pretty sure they've now clarified it, so you can't, I don't think you can get it on terrain, but you get it on things that target them for moving slower and so on. So that's good. I mean, it's not as great as being able to freely move through terrain without any penalty, but, you know, it's something. It's just making them a little bit more maneuverable, and that's because 9th edition, you need that. You know, all the armies need that. And if you're not taking rhinos and so on, then you want your infantry to be as mobile as possible to get across the board. So yeah, Typhus, definitely a winner, and I would highly recommend using him. I'm pretty sure you don't have to have him as a Harbinger. You can go in any play company, but you could do one attachment with that if you wanted to really maximize the Poxwalker thing. You could do that, and the other one with the Demon Prince and the Lord of Contagion there. And incidentally, and we'll just talk about the Lord of Contagion quickly. Obviously, you're going to give him that really great relic. What is it? Hey, I've got this here. I'll rather than just try to remember it. This Glorious Entropy, the Reaper of Glorious Entropy. So that just makes him an absolute beatstick, and really worth it. So you're going to be paying a bit extra CP for this type of list. You're going to be probably starting on 8 or 9 CP or whatever you're going to do, but you will end up recouping those costs, because these will definitely be alive and see combat, as will your Death Shroud if you take enough of them. So in my list, I've got 4 of them, and you know, they're not dying anytime soon, so that's really cool. So we've got that. So now we'll talk a little bit about old Mr. Demon Prince here. You know, he's still a great choice, and you should definitely have one. I think pretty much every list should pretty much have a Demon Prince in it. It's like if you're playing 2,000 points, you definitely should be taking one. They're great. But what's interesting about him is that these days, so this one's kitted out, as you can see, for 8th edition. So the double talons with the wings is like what everyone took, right? You know, but now it seems like the sword is the better option, right? And actually not giving them wings at all, because they've got that sort of decrease in their flight movement, but a sort of increase, I think it's a bit of an increase in their ground movement. So there's only like a difference of like 2 inches. So, you know, there's no real point in the wings really, unless you're really gunning for that sort of, as I said, with the drones and the mowers, and have him flying up, you know, to really put a lot of pressure on. Then that would be an option. But otherwise, he probably doesn't need the wings, and so I'm going to try him without them. And that's saving a lot of points. I mean, that's 35 points. As I said, if you're taking him, you're gaining 50 points there, you're gaining 35 there, that's 85. That's like another one of those Virons, the elite choices. That's a Blightspawn to put into this pack, so you can guarantee that nothing's going to get the charge on you. Stuff like that, right? Or a Plague Surgeon if you're going to put him alongside Plague Marines or whatever, and get some 6+ Feel No Pains. So, you know, you've got those different options there, and so I think just bare bonesing him a bit and making him a little cheaper and that sort of thing is probably going to be best. And I think the sword is the best, although I'm going to continue to run the double talons just because I like the extra attacks. But he probably should have the sword, because I think there's some good options there. I think you can get him up to like strength 9 or something. So that's, well, I've seen another video someone talk about that. So, you know, that's probably the better option in terms of damage and just options for taking out vehicles. And that brings me to my final point about these HQs. So, you know, a Death Guard army has some tough vehicles and some tough shooting in there, but it's kind of limited. Once those things get knocked out or get, you know, reduced, you don't really have a lot of other options to take out high value targets, high armor targets. And so that's another reason to take this type of configuration in a double detachment with these 3 lords, because they're all capable of taking out vehicles and elite troops on their own. They're more than capable of doing it. And if you're taking all the other lesser ones, you know, they're not really going to be able to do it for you. These are the threats, you know, for that close quarter end game kind of thing, and will give you the option. So if you are unlucky and your plague burst crawlers and all that stuff get knocked out, well, you've still got these to finish the job, and they will be alive because you're using those Death Shroud. So yeah, I feel like this is definitely going to carry you through to the end of the game, because especially if you're going against something that's very shooty, you're probably not going to have much of those vehicles, the haulers and so on, alive to do the work for you, and that's a big problem in the Death Guard book. So as far as I can see, there's a little weakness there, right? Something that people can exploit. So if they know what they're shooting at and they know how to do it, they can dismantle you. You're not as tough as you were. You know, the resilience, the -1 damage is good, but it's nowhere near what it was before. You know, in the final stages with the War of the Spider, that whole configuration was pretty brutal. So you've got to be a little bit more careful, and I think this type of thing is going to give you that resilience, especially if you're new to Death Guard and just starting. This is like super powerful and is going to carry you a little bit when you're sort of, you know, figuring out the tactics and what you want to do. And then, you know, as you get more confident, yeah, you might drop one of these and use some of the other buff characters and play it a bit more nuanced. Which certainly does work, and you know, the big tournament lists don't always have this type of thing. You know, they're using different kind of configurations as well. But I like to have a slightly shooty list, so this is my way of compensating for the lack of, I guess, close combat on the other units, and giving me something there to counter when my shooting units fail. And if you're in the same boat and you're looking at that and you're wanting to do that kind of firepower list, then I think this type of option here, and definitely Typhus, is by far one of the best. 165 points is a bargain for what you're getting out of him, definitely. And you know, 140 points for a basic Demon Prince is awesome as well, or 120 for him. So they're all great. You know, Moon Playcasters are nice. We'll just put a few 2 cents in there for him. They are good and definitely worth taking. But as I said, I think he takes it over them, because just for the value, the double point, like the fact, I mean, it does put it all in one basket too, like, you know, you only got one target then, but yeah, I still think that's pretty much worth it, because he's not going to die. You know, it's going to be, you're going to have to really put some effort in to get rid of him. So yeah, that's pretty much my thoughts on this little week's rant. I hope you enjoyed it, and let me know if there's anything I've missed. I'm pretty sure that's all correct information, but yeah, I'm only new back into the hobby after a long hiatus, so some of what I said may not be exactly true, and by all means correct me in the comments if I've missed something, or if you think there's a better combination or a better use or a better way to run these, then I'd love to hear it. But otherwise, have a great rest of your week, and keep hobbying, and I'll catch you on the next one.